Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we're going to be making our own dirt. So stay tuned. The first thing we have to do is get ourselves some dirt. Ooh, there's a lot of roots in here. There's a lot of roots. These small stones and gravel and sand, this is what I'm looking for, so I'm going to take some of this. The next thing to do is get yourself some of these aluminum baking pans. You can get them at the dollar store for a few bucks. I'll put that inside a cookie sheet and dump your dirt in. I might do two of them actually. Like that. If you're wondering why we put these on a cookie sheet, it's because we're going to bake it. All this dirt have all kinds of organisms that you don't want on your layout. So we are going to bake it at about 375 degrees for at least half an hour. The dirt is out of the oven and it is quite hot. So you kind of want to be careful when you're playing around with this stuff. So I'm going to, mix it up a little bit just to let all the heat kind of escape and then let it cool down, and then we will go on to the next stage, which is filtering this stuff out. So I let the dirt dry overnight because you want this to be as dry as possible, and now it's time to strain it. And these strainers right here I just got from the dollar store, cheap but effective. This one, however, cost me like 25 bucks, but it's a really good quality, it's really fine, works really good. And then you just need a couple of trays or containers that you can strain the dirt into. So we're going to start with the large hole strainer. So I have 4 trays of dirt. This is like a coarse dirt. This is definitely a lot more sand, but I'm gonna mix those together and get a fine strainer out, and we're gonna get the fine dust out of it. This right here, there's a lot of little rocks in here, which I need to get out. While this is just junk. Way too thick of dirt, I don't need it. It's gonna go back in the ground. And now our fine strainer. Sure is dusty, which is why you should do this outside. So I now have a tray of this finely filtered dirt and sand. This works great for N scale. It also works in HO scale. I have the coarse dirt and sand, not so good for N scale, but it would work for HO scale. And because I'm only working in N scale, this stuff now is junk to me. I don't need it. I'm only going to be working with this. Now I can filter this again with some cheesecloth or something like that, and that will get me that fine filtered dust. But out of all this, you might get about that much of a cup out of it. It's really not much. It's surprising. But for me, I think this is what I want, and it's going to work in areas of my layout that I need. And the next step is to get all the little tiny rocks out of this. That is not going to be that easy. I built this little strainer by drilling 1/4-inch holes in this little tub, and that allowed me to filter out all this stuff because this is way too big for N scale. And now I need to filter out the little rocks from the dirt, And to do that, I'm going to wash this, which is going to turn all this dirt into mud, and clean that off, and then I will be left with just a little bits of rock. I got a lot of the dirt off just with the garden hose and through a strainer, but now I'm going to use a little bit of dish soap. I mean, just a little bit. Oop, that's a lot. And we're going to soak that in, and that will help remove the dirt. You can see how much cleaner the water is now, which means these are pretty much done. So from this bucket, I managed to get a jar of this fine dirt and sand, and a bunch of these little tiny stones, which this is actually quite a bit of it, because I use this on my layout where there are rock formations, and these little stones, which would actually be quite large in real life, but they settled down along the sides of the rocks and whatever, and it gives it a realistic look. And because they're real rocks, it makes it more realistic with all the different shapes, sizes, and colors. And if you don't like the variety of colors, you can always add a paint pigment to match the coloring of the rest of your layout. So there's lots of different options. Now, full disclosure, I did this differently than I normally would. Typically, I would do this in two separate jobs. One would be just for dirt, where I filtered that down, and the other would be for a sand and gravel, where I filtered that down. If I'm doing strictly dirt, you get a whole bunch of the coarse dirt, which you've basically seen. Then you get your fine dirt, which is essentially the same kind of texture as that. And from the fine dirt, you can filter that down to this ultra fine dirt, which is almost a powder. And this stuff I use at the edges of my roads, or in areas that you're not going to cover up with, green coverage or grass or anything like that. If I was going to put grass over it, I would use just the coarse dirt because you get so much more of it. But yeah, that powdery dirt looks awesome. You can also use sanded grout, which this is what this is right here. Just keep note that when you apply like a water mixture to it, it dries quite hard. Whereas this stuff can dry, or not really dry, but when you add a water to it, because it's dirt, it turns into a bit of a mud. So you gotta be a little careful where you're applying it. But as I've shown already, I feel like that turned out great. Another material you can get out of this is ballast. This is sand that I got from a sandbag, and I mix it 1-to-1 with my Arizona Rock and Mineral ballast, which is real rock, so it mixes great. And because I mix it 1-to-1, I double the amount of quantity I get out of it, which is fantastic. It also adds an element of color, which is great. Now, don't mix dirt in with your ballast because, like I mentioned earlier, that can turn into a mud, which won't look great. Also, you want to make sure that your sand is washed and cleaned because it will glue better, and it'll also keep the coloring and texture much better as well. Is this process worth it? Well, you don't get a tremendous amount of yield out of a bucket of dirt, and it is quite time consuming, so your value per hour isn't all that great. But it is a natural product, so the variety that you get is quite extensive, which is fantastic, and you can mix match however you want based on your layout. Plus, if I start to run low on any of this stuff, I can just go out and do the process again, and it's only going to cost me time. So you'll have to decide if this process is valuable to you and your layout. Now, if you found this video helpful, throw me a like, leave a comment, and as always, thanks for watching.